Run, 3, 2, 1. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's episode of Highlights Podcast. We are here with a total dynamo who the universe keeps somehow bringing us together. Despite whatever efforts we have to be organized, we keep getting thrown together with emails and calendar scheduling. And I am so psyched to introduce you guys, all of you highlighters, to my very new friend, Erin Hatzikostas.
You got it.
Hatzikostas. She's the author of a book called You Do You-ish, and I cannot wait to dive in. Erin, thank you so much for joining us today on the Highlights Podcast.
No problem. And if your viewers, I know you like keep seeing me do this, it's because everything's opposite. So I'm like still trying to get oriented. I'm like, okay, my hair's out of whack here. But yeah, no, Erin, it's so good to be here. I can't wait to talk to you and to all your listeners.
Awesome. Well, okay. So you're open of your book. You talk about the fact that you have an interesting habit, which is that you like to bust out the running man in random occasions, appropriate or otherwise. Can you tell us more? Because my husband cannot do the running man and we joke around about it all the time. So can you let us know what's going on with the running man?
Yeah. And the running man is so symbolic for me because like if you said, Erin, let's go, I know you're out in LA, right? Like if you said, let's go to this dance club and dance, I'd be like, hell's no. Like, I can't stand it. But if we were in like some random like Irish pub and nobody was dancing, I would start dancing. Like I hate normal. The running man, it started in college, and it's funny you say your husband can't do it. I can't really either. I have like this Erin version of the running man, and it's just become my signature. And I like I said, I only like to do it though when you're not supposed to dance.
So good. I love it. Well, I think that is a really good segue for the moment of your book that I loved, by the way, and highlighters, wait till you read this book. It's phenomenal. Her voice comes through the pages like you're talking to a friend. I mean, it really is so, it's a book about authenticity. So obviously it's not going to be, packed with bullshit, but it really does kind of hit you in the face in the best possible way. So one of the lines you have in the open, you say that you were writing your book and you realized that you were getting stuck. You hit a wall. And a lot of people on this podcast and who listen to this podcast are contenters and authors. And so we've all had that writer's block and that moment of like, what am I even doing? Where am I going? What is happening? And you were talking to your editor and you said that the minute that you realized you were trying to make it be like a normal book was where the obstacles began to arise. And the line that I just underlined like so hard, I about went through the page. It was like, I realized that whenever I'm doing what I'm supposed to be doing, that's what makes me lose my shit. And in that moment, I was like, oh my God, kindred spirit, totally get it. Because I think for some people, they like to have a roadmap. They like to have a game plan. Normal to them feels like a space they can operate from at their highest capacity. But there are other personalities like yours and like mine, and maybe like some of our listeners, where when we are provided this clear, normal, major air quote, plan or box or strategy, instead of providing that sense of order, it actually makes us twig out because we feel like we aren't able to operate as our most authentic selves. So tell me more about that realization, how that's impacted how you're growing your business, and how should we redefine that? I mean, is that a good realization to start with? Is that it's okay to not like normal, like whatever normal is, right?
Yeah. And a lot of times when I don't like normal, I tell people like, it's not just to like get attention and buck the norm and, ooh, look at me, I'm different. I actually think the thing that makes it such kryptonite in those moments when I feel like I should do something, it's usually, Erin, that I'm doing something that I actually wouldn't like. Like, I don't really like predictable. I don't like, normal myself. And so I think a lot of times it isn't just about me and my aversion. It's like, well, I know I should write a preface, and my preface is supposed to tell you like all the lessons I learned while I was writing the book. But because I've seen so many prefaces do that same damn thing, like I don't necessarily want predictable. And so when I start to do something normal, it feels like I'm giving something to somebody that I'm not sure I would want. And the thing the thing that's really helped me the most, I write a tiny bit about it in the book, and it might just happen to be what I think will be book number 2, is it's not about completely bucking the norm and being rogue all the time. I actually apply something I call the 50% rule. And the 50% rule is essentially like, Yeah, learn from others, especially when I left the corporate world after, 22 years and became an entrepreneur just 2 years ago. Like there was a lot of stuff I didn't know. And so we're always taking courses and masterminds and learning from people. And that's good. And, what I've learned is apply the 50% rule. So 50% of what you learn from others, like, yes, take it. Don't learn from their mistakes or take what feels good to you, but like give yourself permission to take the other half and do it your own freaking way. And just, and that's how we innovate. That's how we do new things. If we don't do that, something that worked 2 years ago, let's say in book writing or copywriting or how we post on Instagram, if nobody applied the 50% rule, we'd all just be like walking around like zombies doing the same old thing. So it's not a complete, like, utter disrespect for learning and sort of following, but I love the 50% rule. It gives you permission to have the best of both worlds.
Mm-hmm. I think that's the word, right? It's like authorizing ourselves to be okay with, like, not only maybe not loving something, but like setting it free and trusting that maybe our knee-jerk reaction isn't always a terrible idea. Like sometimes
Yes.
it's like, our gut reaction, we're like, well, we haven't thought it through. We haven't analyzed it. Is it proven? Is there a success story? Is there a case study? Did someone else do it? But it's like, sometimes that's the beauty of it, right? Is like, because it hasn't been done, maybe that's part of the brilliance or part of the failure and stupidity, which then later leads to the brilliance, but we just can't see it yet. Right. So,
that's right.
Well, I love, you have this acronym in your book and it's so strong. I could not stop thinking about it. You call it your HUMANS acronym, and you go through these different categories of, you say humility, the unexpected, model, adapt, narrate, and spark. And that's a lot of concepts all at once. But I think for someone listening, where should they start with understanding how to tap into that authenticity, and how do we do ourselves better, right? By using some of these different steps that you've outlined in your book.
Yeah. So we're having a framework, which seems like a freaking oxymoron to authenticity, came about was, I had this really successful corporate career. I became a CEO of a 1,000-person company, turned the company around. And when I decided to leave, everybody kept saying, oh, we'll miss your authentic leadership. And, authenticity is a word I had heard, but like that quote unquote badge had never been pinned on me. And Erin, when they constantly, the people over and over, I kept hearing that authentic leadership. It was the first time where I sort of thought, was that what it was? Mm-hmm. Like I'd always had this feeling like, I'm not saying my career was easy because that would be annoying, but I always felt like I was having this success, but I wasn't sacrificing the same as everybody else. I wasn't moving my family everywhere. I wasn't always on a plane. I wasn't playing the politics, right? Like I wasn't sort of compromising everything to have it. And when people said authentic leadership, it hit me that not only was I an authentic person, but I had somewhere along the line subconsciously started using authenticity as my secret weapon. Like I had not. So I always tell people, I'm not here to give you this passive la-ti-da, free-willing, like be yourself, because that sounds great, especially in the corporate world. And then you walk in the doors, virtual or not, and you're like, oh, that's not going to work. Right. And again, what I teach isn't also to be somebody else. But what I realized when I got pinned with that badge, I was like, okay, yes, I was myself, but I also knew I was a more nuanced sort of individual. I knew that I was approachable, but I was always also I could be tough when I needed to. And so when I thought, okay, if this is my secret weapon, I need to teach it to other people, right? Like all those people that are frustrated out there, especially the women and the diverse people that aren't getting tapped for the big jobs, I need to teach it. But then like, how do you teach something so personal? Right. And so what I realized, I looked at the Greek definition of the word, which is authentikos, and it means to be genuine, but also means to be original and authoritative. And I thought, aha, I was like, my hypothesis was right. Authenticity, and what makes not just me, but like when we see Oprah or some of these other people that we were like, oh, they're so authentic, what makes them that? And so once I had that permission, that to define it more than just being yourself, which allowed me also to say, okay, maybe I can teach this. Mm-hmm. Then I really spent, the last couple of years figuring out, how do I put a framework? How do I put a formula? What have I seen? What have I done? And that's where HUMANS comes into play. And I really see these 6 different principles that are so evident in people that you say are authentic and in the things that I did. And so Humans is really meant to give you this place to start to say, okay, if I can shift my mind to say it's not just about permission, but I can actually use authenticity to connect better, to stand out, to get people's attentions, to get promoted, to just live a better life. Like, where do I start? And that's really where the framework takes people through, those training wheels of doing that.
I love that, because it's so funny. I hate normal, but I love a good framework. So it's like we can hold both, right? Like, and I love that you said that. You're like, it's so funny that we're saying, I hate to follow the rules, and then I'm giving rules, but you can hold space for both. And I love that. I think one of my questions, so for not everyone is, we teach the things that come easily to us. Like, our superpower is the thing that everyone's like, Erin, how are you such an authentic leader? For me, my whole life, everyone's like, where did you get all this energy? You don't even drink coffee. Like, what, everyone has their thing. And you're like, duh, everyone has it. But it's like, no, that's your thing, right? And I think that even when we have a superpower that we double down on and use, so let's say authenticity for you and I comes pretty easily, but even I, for sure, I'm sure maybe sometimes for you, find it challenging to be authentic. And I'm pretty good at it. And it still can be hard and scary. I mean, the other day, as a motivational speaker, we're paid for our energy and for being upbeat and for, providing like the light and the game plan. Well, as my sweet fur baby passed away 2 weeks ago. Well, let's just say I've been the opposite of like light and motivated. And so for me, I've always been really authentic on social media. The last couple of days, I've been kind of being real and raw, authentic, almost to a scary point, like that line of like, maybe it's like TMI, maybe it's oversharing, but I was using it as a catharsis to like reach out to my community and be like, I'm hurting. I am not okay. Like, I'm shooting these promo videos for my clients, but what's happening behind the scenes is I'm like crying, and I'm giving them the whole story. My point is, I sent a video to one of the clients and she didn't get back to me right away. And immediately I started doubting. I was like, okay, she saw what I was sharing on social media. She's like, do we really want to hire like a depressed motivational speaker? I'm like, did I blow the contract? I spiraled out into this like self-doubt, second guessing shit that I have not done in a long time. And I realized like, oh yeah, that's why people are scared of being authentic, because we're so afraid of a negative reaction that's going to do the opposite of build us up. So what would you say to someone, not anyone in particular, not naming any names, what would you say to a listener who maybe is feeling a little bit of either like regret around authenticity or fear around some of the negative reactions we can get from people when we do peel back those layers? Because I think people say be yourself, but also fit in. You know what I mean? It's kind of like, so what do you think about that?
Yeah. So, first of all, I think everything's just one big freaking experiment. And like I talk about in authenticity, adapt is the A, right? And adapt is both be a plug into other people. And again, that's not meant to be hypocritical, but because authenticity is about connecting with people, you need to sort of make sure you sort of plug into them. You also are changing and adapting all the time, whether that's on a macro level as your career changes, your life changes, or you kind of on a little more micro level, your life in this moment is different than it was 3 weeks ago because you've had this tragedy. And I would say, what we think is this step into quick hardening cement is not, it's actually sand. And so I think it's just one big experiment. So you having this moment where you were more raw and with a client, and then you started to sing your sucky songs, as I talk about, and you're not sure if the songs were really playing or in your head, or they playing on like the main station. It's just one big experiment. I think over time, you'll start to collect those experiments and start to figure out like, where are your dials, where are your boundaries? But like I always tell people, I don't change people, I change their addiction. And I, first of all, I'm confident that you being more vulnerable is going to connect not just with your followers, but also with your clients, because they're people as well. But at the same time, I can't tell you for sure. Like, you could be working with some asshole client that's like, that's just too much. That's going to happen.
She came back around, and it was totally, like you said, I was playing a totally bullshit narrative in my mind that was not happening on the main stage, as you said, and I love that analogy. So you're dead on. You're exactly right. That's exactly what I was doing. And how many times do we do that, right? So sorry, I keep going.
Yeah, no, and it's just a bunch of experiments. And what you said before, Erin, I agree. Like, people could look at both of us. We're pretty pretty audacious, sort of a little bit more outspoken, kind of extroverted energy, and say, okay, yeah, that works for you, but not for me.
Mm-hmm.
And I am so confident. I've had so many clients, even messages since the book's been out, of people just starting with the small things. Like one of the small things I say for people in corporate America, like change your out of office. Stop sounding like a stuffy, like robot. You've been saying the same damn thing for 20 years. Like talk like a human. Like I'm going to the Berkshires to get away for a long weekend so I'm not as cranky. And so everybody can kind of pick where they want to start their experiment. They can start really, to me, that's like, there's a low risk there in changing your out of office to be a little more human. Or, they can dial it all the way up to being, in a big meeting and, and I don't know, singing into a tampon or something like that. Yeah. You would know nothing about that, right? So I think it's a dial. I think it's a set of experiments. I mostly, though, will say to your listeners, authenticity almost always wins. It almost always wins. And so you got to do your own experiments, but from somebody that's been running this race for so long, and it was a math major, I was really shitty at it, but I understand the law of large numbers. Like my business case throughout my 46 years on this earth is pretty strong. And at the end of the day, I think if you lean towards authenticity, especially in the richer definition and the way that I teach it, it's always going to help you. It's always going to make you win.
So good, Erin. So I love that so much. Thank you for sharing that. And it's so good. And honestly, it's funny because I interview so many authors, and you and I both have a phenomenal, we're blessed with this awesome network of like badass women. And it's funny because it's like, it's the things that we know, like we've heard things on different podcasts or we see it on a glittery coffee mug, but the way people deliver it, you can tell if they're walking that talk and if they really believe it and have seen the power firsthand. And that's what I felt when you just said that. So hopefully our highlighters did as well. I'm sure they did. Okay. Tell us about your proudest coaching moment, which is in the third part of You Do You-ish, where you're talking about kind of redefining what the top looks like. Because I think a lot of us have major struggles with not just defining what success looks like for us, but also redefining it in light of whether it's, I don't know, a global pandemic, losing a loved one, whatever you're struggling with in this season, redefining what that mountaintop looks like for you. So can you share that proud coaching moment with our highlighters?
Yeah. So there's kind of two stories. So one, I'm going to tell the proudest coaching story because it's hilarious and I think it'll really stick with people. And actually the proudest coaching moment, I always tell people, like, I'm a career coach. I coach girls basketball, my daughter's basketball team, but the proudest coaching moment story that I tell is actually my Uncle Bob's. So I'll tell that, and then I'll tell a little bit about, the mountaintop. So my Uncle Bob, he's hilarious. He looks like George from Seinfeld, like just like him, but he's a little crazier. He's a little bit like, he walks in the room like Kramer, but he looks just like George Costanza. And he tells this story about when my cousin Matthew, his only son, so he was a real athlete. My uncle was, and actually Matthew became one as well. But he says, of all the times I coached his soccer and his baseball, my proudest coaching moment was the Easter egg hunt when he was like 2 or 3 years old. And he tells a story about getting to the Easter egg hunt. And you guys can picture it, right? Like there's, we'll call it 50 kids all lined up with their baskets and their parents crouched over telling them what to do and the excitement, and they see all the eggs. And my Uncle Bob leans over to Matthew and says, do you see all of those eggs like lined up? And, he of course nods his head. And then my Uncle Bob says to him, do you see that tree way out in the distance? And my cousin looks at him and says, yeah. And he said, when they say go, I want you to keep running, and I don't want you to stop until you get to that tree. And Matthew nods his head again. So they, 3, 2, 1, go. And he tells the story, sure enough, like all the kids go. And then as soon as they hit that first line of Easter eggs, all the heads, zoom, right, hit the ground, except for Matthew. And while those kids are all down, like fighting each other for the Easter eggs, there's Matthew, and he's running and he's too young to know how stupid he looks, right? He's running and he's running. He's listened to his dad. He's running all the way to the tree, and he gets to the tree. And of course, what happens? He like scoops up freaking more Easter eggs than he can fit in his basket. And my uncle says, my proudest coaching moment. And I tell that story because so often I feel like whether you're in corporate America or you're an entrepreneur, you know, and it goes back to like, we learn all these things, right? We learn how to write a book. We learn how to launch an online course. We learn how to, you know, the steps we're supposed to do to get to the promotion. And basically what we're doing, if we're just listening to what everybody else says, is we're just dropping at those first Easter eggs. And we're not thinking about, how do I stand out? How do I do something new? How do I do something that's different? How do I think a little bit more strategically, not just for the business, like we're all good about coming out with strategic business plans, but for myself? How do I come up with a more strategic way for myself to thrive, survive, and, you know, and stand out in my career? And that is just like the visual. And I always try to tell people that when I coach and preach and teach authenticity, like I'm essentially saying, like, all those other companies, you know, they're talking about the executive presence and the lean in and the, you know, networking. And it's like, they're all just sitting around, like grabbing up the, instead, I believe my strategy has you running through that tree, and it has you standing out, and it has you doing something different. So that's the story about my uncle. And then you mentioned the who says the top. I think that's really powerful for your listeners and viewers too. So I was 22 years corporate career. Last 3 years, I was a CEO of about a 1,000 person company. We were a 9-figure revenue company. Turned it around. Like, my reputation, Erin, was like at an all-time high. So I was part of a larger parent company. I had kind of hinted I was itching for something new. They were like, "What about this? And what about that? And what about?" And like throwing all these like big jobs that I, you know, 5 years earlier would have like never thought I would have. But something inside me said, my itch, the scratch is just so much bigger. Like I knew I loved to exponentially learn. So I knew I needed something new. And I thought it probably isn't here anymore, even though I've been at this parent company for 22 years. And I hadn't really vocalized it to anyone yet. You know, it was sort of running through my head. And I went on a business trip, and I was on Southwest. So I remember talking to the woman first in the line, right, the cattle call line, and then we got on the plane where we struck up such a nice conversation. We sat next to each other, and you know, she was an entrepreneur. She had done the corporate thing, and then she ran her own small HR practice. And I kept asking her all these questions. I was just so curious, and finally, I was like, took a breath, and I said, "Oh, I'm sorry. I'm so curious. You seem so happy, and here's what I'm thinking." And it was the first time, Erin, that I had ever really vocalized it out loud. So I said to her, you know, "I'm thinking about leaving and going to do da 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 da." And as soon as it came out of my mouth, hearing it, I was like, "Oh, that's really freaking stupid," right? Like, I'm like, okay, now that I've put words to it, knowing all the opportunities I have in the corporate world, like, that's really stupid. So I almost retracted. I said to her, "Oh, but that would be really stupid right now because of blah, blah, blah." And she just looked at me so succinctly, so matter-of-factly, and just goes, "Who says this is the top?" And I was just like, and you know, just sometimes it's those metaphors, and instantly that metaphor came to life. Instantly, I literally could see these other mountains, and I was like, I don't know what it's like to hike up those mountains. I don't know what the view's like from them. Like, what if I die? And I've been on, you know, what I thought was the only mountain peak there is. And there's this huge, vast set of mountains. And, you know, it just really was the thing that propelled me, and is something that we should always think about. You know, as much success as you have, the crazy thing is there's almost always a new mountaintop to climb. And a lot of times they're even higher, but they look different. And we should always remember to just keep climbing.
Oh, it's so good. And how much do you miss plane ride true confessions with strangers? Like, I swear there are probably 45 strangers walking this earth that know my deepest, darkest secrets that I will never see again, that my mother and my husband do not know. It's like, how much do you just miss that? What happens? You hit 30,000 feet and it's like everyone's a priest and you're just confessing, you know? Like,
you know what? It's so funny, right? It takes the pandemic, and it's like, you look back and you're like, oh my God, those were like free therapists, all my traveling days. And when will that ever return?
You know, who knows? But I love that story. And it's a great thing for, I think, our highlighters to think about, which is, if you are right now in a season where you feel that what you really want to chase down feels stupid, or you feel that the situation that you're in with the corporate job, with your business, is making you feel like you're being held back or made to play smaller, or if you're just generally feeling stuck and you're just like, I don't know why, I just don't feel like I'm making the progress that I want. I think Erin's message is really important, which is, are you taking a minute to look up and look around in new directions and make sure you're not maybe missing another path that might serve you better? Maybe it's not as big of a mountain, but maybe it's a warmer climate. Maybe it's a huge mountain, but it's a nice smooth path. I mean, you don't know until you are brave enough to take your eyes off this immediate smaller realm and just explore what could be out there, what could be possible for you. So I love that challenge. And I think it's something that everyone should keep in mind. Erin's book, You Do You-ish, just came out recently. And when I tell you I read the whole thing in an afternoon with like 2 kombuchas, I just had all the fun. Her voice comes through in the book. The practical stories, whether you're working in corporate or you're an entrepreneur or a network marketer, the lessons are incredible. And they just remind us to be bold and brave enough to step into our power, and truthfully, just like give less shits. I mean, that's kind of one of the takeaways that I got from the book. So, Erin, do you have kind of like a final or a first step that you think people, besides reading your book, could do maybe today? Whether it's, like you said, there's a couple different ways that you can do this, but is there something they can try maybe this afternoon to just start to sort of think more in that direction, or just analyze where they are now? Like, are they being as authentic as they possibly can? And if not, like, what can they do about it?
Yeah, a couple starters are, when you get on a meeting, don't introduce yourself with a chronological order. Like, tell a story about, like, sort of how you ended up there. I like to say authenticity is about exposing who you are when people least expect it. So you're starting a meeting with a story, starting a discussion with a story, a metaphor. It doesn't have to be funny. It doesn't have to be tragic. Just some sort of story. The Out of Office is a good one for the corporate folks. Another starter play that I have is go onto your freaking LinkedIn and talk like a human and just watch how people suck into your profile. And you can check out mine if you want an example. But like, for example, if you look at my position summaries or whatever you call it, every single one of them is a story, including I'm on a board right now. So I still, even though I'm an entrepreneur, like I still have to, like, I put on my big girl pants every once in a while, and I'm part of this, a board of a venture-backed company. And if you look at it, I tell a story. Every single one of them, I tell this, it's almost like, write your summaries like if you were about a half a glass wine in with your best friend at a happy hour. Tell them like in plain language. So go onto your LinkedIn. Don't talk in third person. Don't make it stuffy. Just tell stories. And really, at the end of the day, authenticity is like this super pass to connecting with people. So just look for all those places where you're using buzzwords, you're pretending, it's a third person, it's really you, or you're just kind of saying the same BS. Think about what you would want and then do that thing.
So good, Erin. Thank you so much. And before I let you go, any great books you're reading right now? Any nonfiction books that you have been into? I know you're in book launch mode, so you probably haven't had a lot of downtime for reading, but do you have a go-to like leadership book that you love, or anything to recommend?
I have actually read several books lately. My favorite was the pre-version of your kind of a big deal by this woman, Erin King. So they may be jealous, but I got to see an early copy. It's freaking awesome. I mean, I've read that. I just had this out too. I don't know if you know Lovey Ajayi Jones.
No.
This was her second New York Times bestseller. It just hit the list last week. It was launched a couple weeks ago. Professional Troublemaker, The Fear Fighter Manual. I have it out because I just interviewed her on my podcast an hour ago, which was it's a tremendous book as well. And then, I've also slipped into a lot of fiction. I love to read, but sometimes you gotta go into La La Land after spending so much time in the nonfiction world.
Absolutely. Well, Erin, you are just a treasure, and I love your sass. I love your candid nature. I'm so glad that the universe smushed us together in multiple ways. I think it was meant to be. Highlighters, definitely check out Erin. Where is your favorite place for people to connect with you on the internets?
Yeah, I would say go to my website, it's just the letter B, AuthenticInc.com. So that's a great hub for the book, the podcast, the blog, et cetera, et cetera. And then on socials, I'm most active on LinkedIn at Erin Hatzikostas. So I would say I'm the only Erin Hatzikostas in the world. So if you can spell it, you can find me. And then Instagram. I don't have a huge following because I'm really kind of still a newbie there, but I freaking love doing reels and stupid shit on Instagram. So you get full authentic Erin at Erin Hatzikostas on Instagram as well. So I'd love to connect with you in 3D-ish on any of those.
Love it. So good, Erin. Well, thank you so much for spending time with us today on the fly and sharing your brilliance. And I cannot wait for my highlighters to get to know you better through all these different phenomenal avenues. So thank you again so much.
Yeah, thank you. And guys, get ready for her book. It's freaking amazing. So I'm so glad to be part of your world.
Thanks, Erin. All right. I hope to see you in real life very soon. And thank you again so much. We'll see you next time. Thanks, Erin.